She stood in the doorway, completely still. In her own home, in the hallway she had walked through 1,000 times. And there they were, boots that weren't hers, sitting by the door like they owned the place. Sounds from the bedroom. Sounds that told her everything without saying a single word. Vera didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there for maybe 10 seconds. And then something very strange happened. She smiled. Not a sad smile. Not a forced one either. Just a quiet, almost calm smile. And Dennis, her partner of years, the man she had carried on her back like the whole world depended on it, he had absolutely no idea what was coming. Neither did she. Because what happened in the weeks after that moment, the crash, the stranger with the flowers, the vision that saved a man's life, and the secret that unraveled an entire web of lies, none of it was something Vera could have planned. It happened the way real things happen. Sideways. Without warning. Stay until the very end of this story, because the final twist is something I still think about. If that already pulled you in, give this video a like right now. Seriously. It means everything. And if you're not subscribed, please do it. Every week I bring you stories exactly like this one. Let's go from the beginning. Her name was Vera. And here is the one thing you need to know about her first. She gave too much. Not in a dramatic way. Not in the way people talk about on television. Just quietly, constantly, she gave. She gave her time to the magazine she worked for. She gave her energy to Dennis's career. She gave her evenings to editing work she wasn't even asked to do. She gave her weekends to the apartment they shared, his apartment technically, even though she had made it feel like home. She didn't have a lot left over for herself. But she told herself that was fine. That's what love looked like. You showed up, you worked, you stayed. Her parents had died when she was very small. A bus accident. She barely remembered them. Her grandmother had raised her. A woman of few words but enormous love, who saved every kopeck so that her granddaughter could have a small apartment of her own in the city. When her grandmother died too, Vera had nobody, except Dennis. So she held on, tighter than she should have. And here is the thing about holding on too tight. Sometimes you stop noticing that the thing in your hands has already gone cold. Dennis had been changing. Slowly at first. Irritable. Distant. Always working or claiming to be. Vera noticed. Of course she noticed. But she told herself it was stress. Business pressure. A difficult patch. She worked harder. She stayed quieter. She made herself less of a problem. Looking back later, she would understand that she had been disappearing in plain sight. And Dennis had been watching her disappear. And doing absolutely nothing to stop it. The evening she found them was ordinary in every other way. She had come home early. That was all. One of those small accidents of timing that change everything. She turned her key in the lock. Pushed the door open. Stopped. Boots in the hallway. Women's boots. Not hers. And from the bedroom, sounds. You know what those sounds were. You don't need me to describe them. Vera stood there and felt something she didn't expect. Not rage. Not devastation. Just clarity. Like a fog lifting. Like something she had half known for a long time finally stepping into full light. She walked to the bedroom door. She pushed it open. There was Dennis. And a woman with a mass of bright copper hair lying across his pillow. Vera looked at them both. The woman made a sound, shock, maybe guilt. Dennis said nothing. Just stared. And Vera smiled. A small, quiet, almost gentle smile. She turned around. She walked back out. She closed the front door behind her, not a slam. Just click. Outside the building the cold hit her face. November. Dark already. The kind of night that turns your breath to smoke. She had no bag. No money. No plan. Just her phone in her coat pocket and a set of keys. One of which she already knew in some wordless way would never be needed again. She started walking. She had nowhere to go. But she walked anyway. Dennis called her 15 minutes later. She watched his name light up the screen. She put the phone back in her pocket. He called again. She let it ring. There was a coffee shop 2 blocks away. She found her pockets and scraped together enough change for 1 cup. She sat with both hands wrapped around the mug and let the warmth seep into her palms. Around her, ordinary life. A couple arguing quietly. A student typing on a laptop. An old man reading a newspaper. Nobody knew that her life had just ended in a click of a bedroom door. Nobody ever knows. That night she slept in her office. She had been working at the publishing house for years. Long enough to have a key to her own small editor's room. Long enough to know that the night guard, Mikhail Petrovich, a kind old man everyone just called Uncle Misha, would let her in without asking too many questions. He took one look at her face. He didn't ask anything. He put the kettle on. She sat in her office chair, wrapped in her coat, and stared at the ceiling until the sky outside the window turned from black to gray. Dennis's voice from that morning kept replaying without her permission. But alongside it, something stranger. The clarity she had felt in that doorway. It was still there. Underneath the pain. Underneath the exhaustion. Underneath everything. Something that felt like relief. She confronted him the next day. Mistake. He was in her office before she had even made coffee. And when Dennis was cornered, Dennis attacked. He leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed and his chin raised, and he said, "Why didn't you come home last night?" Vera stared at him. She said, "Are you serious right now?" He looked directly at her. "Nos cham. No remorse." He said, "You've been impossible to live with for months. If you were a better partner, this wouldn't have happened." Vera felt the air leave her lungs. Not from the words themselves. From the effortless way he said them. As if he had been practicing. She said, "It's over, Dennis. I'm done." He moved then, fast. Putting himself between her and the door. Not violently, just blocking. He said, "You think you can walk away? You have nothing without me. No home. No connections. Nobody would give you work in this city without my name behind you." Vera looked at him. She thought, how did I not see this? 8 years. How did I look at this man for 8 years and not see this? She didn't answer him. She didn't argue. She just waited very quietly until he left. And then she sat down at her desk and shook for about 5 minutes. And then she stopped. She needed to get her things. The apartment that was his butt had felt like hers. The apartment that now had someone else's boots in the hallway. She went that afternoon. She put her key in the lock. It didn't turn. She tried again. Nothing. He had changed the locks. Overnight. Vera sat down on the stairs outside the door. She sat there for a long time. The cold from the concrete crept up through her coat. Her things were all in there. Everything. Her grandmother's photographs. The small collection of books she had been carrying from apartment to apartment since she was 18. Her work files. Her clothes. Gone. Behind a lock she no longer had a key to. What happened next, I need you to understand, was not what she planned. She had a small apartment of her own on the edge of the city. Her grandmother had left it to her. She rented it out to a family who had been living there for years. Decent people, reliable, who paid on time. She called them. She explained as little as she had to. She asked them to stay for just a little longer. They had a new baby. They were exhausted. She heard it in their voices. She told them to keep the next month without payment. She hung up. So she had no home. No real savings. She had been quietly subsidizing Dennis's life for years without fully admitting it to herself. She had been fired as of that morning. Dennis had called the head of the publishing house before she even arrived. She had the clothes on her back. A phone. A small amount of dignity she was gripping with both hands. And that small, strange, inexplicable feeling of clarity that had appeared in the doorway the night before and refused to leave. She was walking along a street of shops 2 days later. Nowhere particular. Just walking. She passed a flower shop, an expensive one, the kind with white roses in the window and fairy lights that made the whole display look lit from within. She stopped to look at her reflection in the glass. She looked terrible. puffy eyes, mascara that had given up entirely. She looked at herself for a long moment, and something in her, quietly, without fanfare, said, "Okay, now we start again." She turned away from the window and walked directly into a man carrying a basket of white roses. The collision knocked her off her feet. Flowers scattered across the pavement. The man said something sharp, not cruel, just startled. He reached down to help her up. His hand closed around hers, and the world disappeared. That's the only way Vera knew how to describe what happened next. The world disappeared. Her lungs seized. Her head spun. And in her mind, vivid, immediate, absolutely real, she saw him. This man. The one standing right in front of her. She saw him inside a black car. She saw fire. She saw the number plate, 545, burning through black smoke. She heard him screaming. And then she was back on the pavement, on her knees, gasping. Vera had this gift since childhood. That's what her grandmother called it, a gift. Though for a long time it had felt more like a curse. She didn't have visions often. Maybe a handful of times in her whole life. But when they came, they were never wrong. The man helped her to a bench near a bus stop. He was clearly uncomfortable. A well-dressed man in a good coat, carrying expensive flowers, now involved in this strange scene on a city pavement. She looked up at him. She said, "I need you to listen to me." He looked at her. Wary, a little impatient. She said, "Don't get in your car tomorrow. The black one, with the 545 plate. Don't drive it. Something is going to happen to you." He stared at her. She could see what he was thinking. He thought she was unhinged. She watched him make a polite excuse, check that she was physically okay, and walk to the black car parked at the curb. The exact car from her vision, and drive away. She watched him go. She thought, he didn't believe me. She thought, I've done what I can. But something in her knew that wasn't the last time she would see him. She found out later what had happened. Not immediately, later, in pieces over the course of days. His name was Oleg. He owned a media company, publishing houses, television channels, the kind of empire built quietly, brick by brick. He had lent his car to a friend the next evening. A man named Ilya who had forgotten documents at the office. Ilya had sent a driver. The car was tampered with. The brakes. The fuel tank. The car caught fire. The driver was killed. The number plate was 545. When Oleg put all of this together, sitting in a police statement in a hospital corridor in the long aftermath of violence, he thought about the strange girl on the pavement outside the flower shop. And he went looking for her. He found her in a village. That's another story in itself. The cold walk through the snow, the neighbor's house, the old lock and the broken window she had tried to fix with a piece of linoleum. He found her half-conscious from fever and cold and what turned out to be frostbite from carrying a drunk man through a snowstorm to his mother's house. He drove her to the hospital himself. He stayed. And here is where I want to slow down and let the story breathe. Because what happened next was not dramatic. It was not a grand gesture. It was something much simpler than that. Oleg came back. Every day. He came with books. With bad hospital coffee. With the willingness to just sit quietly in a room with another person and not need it to be more than that. He asked her about the vision. Not in the way of someone testing her. In the way of someone genuinely curious. She told him about her grandmother. About the gift she had never asked for. About the way it worked, rare, unpredictable, always pointing at something real. He listened. He said, "You saved my life with a warning I had no reason to believe." She said, "I know you didn't believe me." He said, "I didn't. But I still didn't drive the car." She looked at him. He said, "I don't know why. Something in the way you said it. Something that made me call Ilya instead." A pause. He said, "I was gonna fire Ilya, not have him use my car." Something crossed his face. He said, "And now I know why." The twist, when it came, arrived the way devastating things usually do. Quietly. From a direction Oleg hadn't been watching. He went to Ilya's apartment one evening, not expecting to find anything except a friend. He heard voices before he reached the door. He pushed it open. Ilya was there. And Dennis was there.
Vera est Denis.
The man who had locked her out of her own apartment and had her fired from her own job. Oleg listened to the conversation. What he heard was this: Dennis had been the one to plant the idea. Dennis, who was connected to Ilya through a chain of mutual interest and mutual greed. Dennis, whose publishing house, the one Vera had run for years without proper credit or compensation, turned out to be partly owned by Oleg's company. Dennis, who had spent years quietly skimming. Dennis, who had panicked when Oleg's company started sending auditors. Dennis, who had decided that a dead owner was cleaner than a live investigation. And Ilya, Oleg's oldest friend, had agreed to help. Oleg stood in that doorway for a long moment. He thought about Vera on the pavement outside the flower shop. He thought about her vision, about the fire, about the clarity she had shown even while her own life was falling apart around her. He thought about the driver who had died in his car. He stepped into the room. Dennis was arrested 3 days later. Ilya too. The investigation that followed untangled years of hidden losses, faked accounts, and very deliberate financial crimes. The publishing house, freed from its previous management, reopened with new leadership. Oleg offered Vera the position of editor-in-chief. Not out of guilt, not out of sympathy. He had read everything she had ever written, every piece she had edited. He had spoken to every colleague of hers he could reach. He said, "You built that place. Someone else put their name on it. I want to put the right name on it now." She said, "Yes. There is one more thing." The copper-haired woman Vera had found in her bedroom. Her name was Marina. And Marina, it turned out, had been involved with Ilya. Not Oleg. Marina had gone to Oleg's house when Ilya cut her off. She had told Oleg she was carrying Ilya's child and trying to use the situation as leverage, claiming the child was Oleg's to stay close to money while Ilya's schemes unraveled. Vera put this together slowly. The hair, the face, the woman who had been standing in Dennis's bedroom that night, and who had then appeared in Oleg's house. She had thought, coincidence. But there are no coincidences in this story. There was only a web, greed, lies, and people using each other. And Vera had walked into it by accident and come out the other side with her hands clean. The night Oleg told her the truth about Marina, they were sitting in the kitchen of his mother's old apartment, the one they had sheltered in when the roads were frozen. He told her everything. He said, "I should have told you sooner. I was afraid you'd leave." She looked at him. She said, "Why would I leave?" He said, "Because there was a time when you thought I had something to do with her. I could see it in your face." She said, "I thought about it for exactly one evening, and then I decided it didn't matter." He said, "How did you decide that?" She said, "Because you came back. Every day. That told me what I needed to know." Vera walked into a flower shop window one November evening and saw the worst version of herself. Puffy eyes, smudged mascara. Someone who had given everything and received almost nothing in return. And she looked at that reflection and quietly decided to start again. Not with a plan. Not with certainty. Just with the decision to keep moving. She had a gift she never asked for. She used it when it counted and then got out of the way. She didn't ask for justice. She didn't plot revenge. She didn't announce what she knew or threaten anyone or play any kind of long game. She just kept walking, and the truth came out on its own. It usually does. What I find beautiful about this story isn't the ending. It's not the job or Oleg or Dennis being arrested. It's that small quiet smile in the doorway. That moment of clarity. When you have been doing too much for too long for someone who deserves too little, and you finally see it clearly, that is not heartbreak. That is freedom. It just doesn't feel like it yet. If this story moved you even just a little, please hit the like button right now. It genuinely helps more than you know. And subscribe if you haven't already. Every single week I bring you a story like this one, real, human, the kind that stays with you. I want to ask you something in the comments. When Vera stood in that doorway and smiled instead of cried, what do you think she was feeling in that exact moment? Was it relief? Grief? Something she couldn't name? Tell me. I read every comment. Always. And next week, I have the story of a man who spent 30 years believing he was an only child. Then a letter arrived at his mother's house that changed everything. He had a brother, living 40 kilometers away. And the conversation they had when they finally met, what was said, what wasn't, and what they both understood in the silence. That story is one I have been holding on to for a while. Next week. Don't miss it.